Welcome to Friday. And today, of course, is February 1st. Happy February, David.
Thank you, Jason. Happy February to you.
It's nice to see you. A little bit of a departure from the norm last show, so we'll stay on topic this show. I know there's a couple things you want to address, and you've introduced this really relatively new and interesting item, which of course is the Electronic Visualization Laboratory at the University of Chicago, the CAVE. What does CAVE stand for again, David? I can never quite remember.
It stands for CAVE, so it's apparently what they call a recursive acronym, right? So you put CAVE and CAVE. It's the CAVE Automatic Virtual Environment, better known by the recursive acronym CAVE. Let me just read what it is an immersive virtual reality environment where projectors are directed to between 3 and 6 of the walls of a room-sized cube. And this is very important for those philosophers amongst us. The name is also a reference to the allegory of the cave in Plato's Republic,
Whoa.
in which a philosopher contemplates perception, reality, and illusion. And of course, that's what we're surrounded by, Jason. We're surrounded by illusion being propagated through examples are the Kinetic North America's social engineering protection appliance. We're being bombarded with illusions through the mainstream media, and there are a number of offline methods of communicating that can spread propaganda very effectively. For example, out at the pig farm in British Columbia. But I do think the allegory to Plato's Republic and the cave, i.e. your sense of reality, if you're chained as a prisoner, and of course that brings us to Christine Marcy, inside a cave, and the only thing you see is the back wall of the cave, effectively everything that shines through the mouth of the cave from the sun and the shadows, you get a two-dimensional impression of what reality is. So with your imagination, you have to fill in what's happening in your visual and perceived two-dimensional world with what's happening in my world, which is 12 dimensions outside. Over to you.
I wasn't even aware that there are 12 dimensions, so that's really impressive, David. You know, there's been some fake news injected into the internet. I don't know if you're aware, but there are some people who seem like they probably should go see a doctor who've been saying that you are a doctor. Have you ever claimed to be a PhD of any kind, David?
No, I'm a BA Hons Cantab, Bachelor of Arts, and that's interesting because I think someone way back in history decided that quote, engineers should really be described as artists because they're creative. Anyway, I was awarded a first-class honours degree at Queen's College, Cambridge University, because I did my degree in 2 years because I was on the fast course, because they thought I was a smart cookie. They accepted I had no common sense, but they did think of me as fairly smart. And then in my third year, I did industrial management. And after you've gone into industry and practiced your trade, so to speak, you can buy, and I think I did for £5, an MA, a Master of Arts. So I'm an engineer with the qualification of Master of Arts, if I remember correctly, that I paid my £5. But beyond that, I have no pretensions of being a PhD. In fact, I wouldn't want to be a PhD because I think you waste too much of your time with a narrow speciality and you get stuck in the cave. Over to you.
Well, there's a lot of research going on looking into your non-existent PhD, so I wish those who should be medicated well in their search, they're wasting time and they're stirring up mud. So we've been speaking about this evil cave from the standpoint that it has the potential to visualize these things. I do think it's important, David, to reiterate the nature of your method. It's this really unique combination between speculation based on evidence in terms of sort of what could have happened, what does this evidence indicate is a possibility, and your speculation about these really endless possibilities is just that, speculation. And certainly if we say anything that someone who we speculate about construes as an accusation, obviously we don't want legal action, but those people could bring legal action. However, someone who's guilty of what it is that you suspect the evidence indicates wouldn't do that, because it would just draw out more information, wouldn't it?
Well, you're absolutely right. So I think let's go straight to the point with respect to Field McConnell's sister, Christine Marcy, and some of the work I did on her background as soon as Field McConnell, sometime in December of 2006, told me he had a high-grade sister who was a bureaucrat in Washington, and it didn't appear, and from what I remember, he didn't know much about her or what her job was. And then the research I did, I was able to fill it in and get additional information from him about the various contacts he's had with her. In particular, a December phone call in 1988. But let me just back to this woman. I believe in 1984, she founded a number of important capabilities within the United States government that would one day support a man-in-the-middle attack on the scale of 911. And one organization she founded with Eric Holder was the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which gave her access to enormous amounts of money after you've sold the heroin and the Lamborghinis confiscated from people who didn't appear to be justified in having custody of these. So now, that represents a great deal of money. Now, what would she do with that money, or what could she do? Well, it's available for county sheriffs and various other organizations to buy the kind of equipment they need to intercept Lamborghinis being driven in the suburbs of Brooklyn by people who don't deserve or appear to have the money to fund the Lamborghini. So that's that. Basically, it's potential slush fund for organized crime, with the cooperation of the criminals from whom the money or the asset has been confiscated. Secondly, she founds the Office of Justice program for the administration of a database for missing and exploited children. Well, that's kind of spooky, because I think over the next 4 years before her call to her brother in December 1988, she began work on converting that database into a catalog of missing and exploited children. What can you do with the catalog of missing and exploited children? Well, you could set up an entrapment scenario where an individual sitting in a 4-star or 5-star hotel, let's say hypothetically, nothing personal, a Bill Clinton in the Port Douglas Sheraton Hotel on September the 11th, he would have been September the 12th, and he would like a child to service his particular aberrations, sexual aberrations, which include, I believe, raping women and biting through their lower lip. So a sexual encounter with Bill Clinton generally involved you ended up somewhat disfigured. He might hand you a handkerchief to wipe the blood off, but the guy is a scumbag.
You're talking about Juanita Broderick, of course.
Of course,
I've spoken with her.
And I'm talking about his 20 or so trips on the Lolita Express to, I think it's Little St. John's Island, controlled by Jeffrey Epstein, where there are dentist chairs well, I don't know if there's several, but there's one dentist chair in the bathroom of one of the chalets of Jeffrey Epstein, who's a convicted pedophile pimp, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there we got Christine Marcy. She has access to the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund. She has access to the database for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that's been upgraded now to the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I allege that she's working on the conversion of the database to a catalog, so that someone sitting, I don't know, in a hotel in Boulder, Colorado can say, I would like access to a 7-year-old blonde girl on Christmas Day, and I'd like the opportunity to torture her to death. I want to go with a little team, another man and a woman, and I want to make sure that after torturing the little girl to death, I've got the pictures, I can take them and show them to the father and the mother and the employer of the father, which is Lockheed Martin, and extort a concession from Lockheed Martin. And I want to be able to sign off a ransom note that we represent a small foreign faction. Well, Jason, I could ask you, what is a small foreign faction doing, moving around the United States on Christmas Day? Well, presumably they would need access to get the visas that would allow them to come in the country and leave again. I mean, just hypothetically, where would you get your visas from? Well, how about the National Visa Center run by Serco, right, since 1994? But I digress. So then what Christine Marcy needs to be able to do to deliver the child and the handlers of the child to a luxury hotel suite in a hotel somewhere around the world, let's say any room in the Marriott chain, and Marriott now, after the acquisition of Starwood, has 1 million rooms at its disposal.
Wow.
All of which I can guarantee you are bugged to hell, meaning any activity that goes on in those rooms is filmed and recorded, right, and is available to, let's say, the evil Bat Cave in Chicago. Well, think about it. Was it great that you see, Jason, if a slight digression, these people are so dumb, they don't understand that basic rule. You can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. Now, you and I, let's assume we're just average people. Eventually, the weight of the truth will break through the bullshit.
I'm
right?
hopeful that's
and
correct.
Let me warn people. I made a statement in the last show about don't get between me and the truth. Now, I look at the people in Able Danger, and I consider them all historically have been my friends, and they've been allied with my objectives with Able Danger, which I wrote and repeatedly, and I did hours and hours of research, technical research. It was based on the idea of crowd-centric crime scene investigation, period. I look at Able Danger now, and there are articles by third parties, did the Jews kill Jesus? Well, for heaven's sakes, folks, if you believe in David Hawkins, and I don't say that you don't have to believe in both of us, Phil McConnell and myself, please go into the chat rooms of Able Danger and make your position clear. Stay a member of Able Danger, read the stuff about Jews killing Jesus, but if you believe the work I've done by myself with Phil McConnell, that I'm now doing with you, who is an expert in visualization, that I think can take me into the evil Batcave in Chicago, with my knowledge about 12-dimensional simulations, you and I can actually put on a show in the evil Bat Room that describes what really happened on 9/11. Right? And that can be compared with the people at Able Danger, what they say happened, the people that what I say happened, what you say happened, and everyone else who, let's say, knows Christine Marcy. Where was Christine Marcy on 9/11, the morning of 9/11? This is the most important, most dangerous bureaucrat in America's history. Where was little Barry Svitoro, better known as Barack Hussein Obama, the senator from Illinois? Was he in the evil Batcave? Why wouldn't he?
I don't know. Does he hang out at the Electronic Visualization Laboratory in the University of Chicago?
Well, why wouldn't he? He's first of all a senator from Illinois, and if we go to the Federal Bridge, right? Let's remind people who are the key players on the Federal Bridge, which I think is a fiber optic link to the imperial brain in the United Kingdom. That's the term that was given to the instrument room of the General Post Office in the 1850s, because that's where all the telegraph cables came in. And that means if you had access to the imperial brain, i.e. the instrument room of the General Post Office, you got your information about the price of wool in Australia before anyone in London, and you could take a position, you could front run the markets. And that's where these great corrupt fortunes have been built and passed on to families, because they've taken basically a monopoly position in the patents that control the communications, and they are front running the markets. Yeah, so now just going a bit over to the left of the schematic, and up a bit, Jason, up a bit. Yes, stop there. So you can see this: the state of Illinois, the most corrupt state in the union, where 4 of the last 7 governors have gone to jail for crimes, amongst others, racketeering. You've got the Department of Justice, that to all intents and purposes, I think from 1984, when Christine Marcy launched the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund and the database for the missing and exploited children, and then in 1994, the Pride organization. Now, what is Pride? As we've discussed this before, but I think it's important to understand. The Department of Justice Pride organization represents the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered and Q. I think you told me that's questioning.
Other people say I was wrong. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the queer or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And let's list these these acronyms if I can remember it. The FBI, the United States Marshal Service, the Bureau of Prisons, the Office of Justice Programs, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the United States Attorney's Office, all the way through down to state and county level. That means anywhere you go for justice in the United States of America today, you ought to be concerned about whether your justice is serving you, let's say as a heterosexual male, or the interests of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered and queer members of those those alphabet soup acronyms. Now, here's where it becomes vitally important. If Christine Marcy, who at one time was the Assistant Deputy Attorney General under Janet Reno and Jamie Gorelick, I think she prefers, for obvious reasons, to pronounce her name Gorelick. I like to think of it as Gorelick. I mean, I don't like to think of licking gore, but I just think it's a better summary of this useless bitch, because she's the mistress of disasters, because she put in the stovepipes between the FBI and the CIA prior to people attempting to track the sleeper cells coming through the United States National Visa Center, courtesy of Serco. Right? Now, what that means is when you're in the evil Batcave, you have access to all of these huge data sets, databases, and you control around them. And why wouldn't the people inside the evil Batcave put on what Dr. Thomas Barnett described? Dr. Thomas Barnett, Naval War College, right? Not me. Dr. Thomas Barnett described, in particular as related to the people jumping out of World Tower I, the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history. Well, you could produce the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history from the evil Batcave in Chicago.
We could certainly view it there.
Of course you could. And you're hardwired, let's say, through fiber optics invented by the British company STC, which was bought by Nortel Networks in 1991, which meant Nortel Networks led the world in equipping the public key infrastructure of the Federal Bridge with high-speed fiber optic links that would allow you to visualize something going on in China from Chicago, or vice versa. Now, you told me about this Christie Bright, Christie Digital. Now, if you look up Christie, it turns out that they have a number of manufacturing plants, and let's say they've got a core technology in the evil Batcave, and I'm quite sure that a lot of that technology would be patented. So the custodians of the patents would have the ability to project a snuff film up on the walls of the evil Batcave. They've got a manufacturing facility in China. Well, maybe the Trump administration is waking up to what I've been saying for years, is when Bill Clinton sent the late former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, John Shalikashvili, to Beijing to address the People's Liberation Army generals in Beijing. And in that speech, and probably the transcript has been scrubbed, at the end of it, John Shalikashvili is supposed to have said to the generals, I mean, they must be salivating, maybe gore-licking is a better word, they must have been salivating, because he said to them, I have been instructed by my president to leave behind details of all America's weapons programs.
Right.
Hopefully stun silence from the listeners to the show, those who haven't heard that before. What does that mean? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the United States of America, has been instructed by the commander-in-chief, Bill Clinton, who's a treasonous scumbag, right, to leave behind details of all America's weapons programs. Well, why wouldn't the Chinese set up manufacturing plants in China for Boeing parts or Christie Digital parts that would allow them to participate in 911? right? I mean,
Well,
it's just,
David,
it's
should we
absurd.
give people a little background on what some of these things are? Because we've introduced a lot of new concepts and terms and technologies, and it might not be clear to people how they all fit together. And I think we've seen there's been some degree of confusion around the internet as to what's actually been said and what other people think has been said.
Right. Well, should we go back to would you like to go back to the Federal Bridge?
I think, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's start with the Federal Bridge because that's one of the first concepts that
If
you
you can put
introduced.
that up, right. Now, let me use a bit of technological history and words. The instrument room of the General Post Office in the 1850s and 1860s in the United Kingdom was described as the imperial brain for very obvious reasons, because the instrument room was where all of the information and data and signals and intelligence for the British Empire would come in. So there's an opportunity of anyone who had access to that imperial brain to front run the markets and get exceedingly rich. Right? Now, this is an era, and I believe it still applies today, where the UK Cabinet Office or the Privy Council, and again, I read this somewhere and it's disappeared from the internet, but I believe the Privy Council, which are the people with access to the Crown or the authority of the Crown or the assumed but perhaps illegal authority of the Crown, they can have control over the instrument room or the imperial brain for 8 days. So if you've got,
What do you
a
mean
bow
for
war
8 days?
well, they can
At
take over the instrument room.
any random 8 days?
Yes, at their choosing. And let me
Wow.
back up to what are known as Crown rights rules associated to patents. The Crown has the right to use any patented issues. Right. So going back to World War II, when the Tizard mission went to the United States and handed off technologies like the cavity magnetron or the proximity fuse to industrialists such as RCA's David Sarnoff, there was a patent sharing agreement that I think still prevails today. Now, I don't know if the readers know, but the alien property custodian in World War I and World War II, and I believe presently, is Northern Trust in Chicago. That means to say anything that the Germans invented or the Italians invented or the Turks invented or the Japanese invented, etc., whether it's in wartime or afterwards, there will be copies registered but not necessarily published and stored at Northern Trust in Chicago. Northern Trust is a shareholder in Serco. Serco shareholders met on the 47th floor of the North Tower, and I believe your buddy, well, he's not your buddy, right? This guy Swigert has been writing to the Federal Trade Commission that David Hawkins, your sidekick, and you and I don't accept the role of sidekick in any
I have
relationship.
never claimed that you are that. It's purely
Well, I know,
Mr.
but
Swigert.
Swigert. So I think he's off his meds. But anyway, apparently he's written, you've shown me some huge statement to the Federal Trade Commission and maybe Wilbur Ross, the guy you interviewed the other day, and said that you and I are conspiring to violate some trade agreement with Serco shareholders, right? And I would point out, if he's talking about, and he is, I believe, Serco Inc. does not have any shareholders because it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the Serco Group in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So this guy, with the puffy hair, no, I don't want to be rude about puffy hair. He's got, I'm sure, a very nice hairdo. That reminds me of Bill Clinton's hairdos. What are they, $500?
There was a dust-up over that at one point, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy Swigert is apparently thinking that we are trying to violate the trade agreement for Serco Inc. and its shareholders, but Serco Inc. does not have shareholders. So wake up and get back to your meds, Mr. Swigert. If you want to talk about, go ahead.
He's actually, of course, not doing it for any reason other than he wants to shut down Crowdsource the Truth. He wants to deplatform, defame, demonetize, lie, and spread all kinds of information to achieve his goal, which is to stop me from hosting people like you, David, who bring all kinds of information. Now, it's quite foolish what Mr. Swigert has done, but fools are prone to do foolish things. As you pointed out, he's sent this document. This is a new document. The other day I showed everybody the Federal Trade Commission complaint that he's filed, which I don't really think the Federal Trade Commission is in a regular practice of listening to crazy complaints that are nonsensical and
Yeah, let me just jump in here, Jason, because I think we need to focus on the possibility that Swigert is not a free agent, right? Just like some of the other people who are sniping at you or at me. They don't tend to snipe at me too much, maybe because I'm confusing them intellectually, I don't know. But the issue here is, are the dark forces, like the dark forces unleashed, I believe, by Christine Marcy, and wittingly or unwittingly by her brother? Because let me go back to her role in setting up, I believe, or enabling or weaponizing the Federal Bridge. So in 1988, she calls her brother and asks him how to handle a prisoner mutiny. Now, of course, it could be a prisoner mutiny. It could be a passenger mutiny. If I understand, on United 93, the passengers mutinied, didn't they?
well,
Because
after it
Todd
was
Beamer and co. I mean, that's the allegation.
yeah.
The hijackers, the alleged hijackers, had told the passengers to stay in their cockpit, and Todd Beamer, you know, the let's roll
Let's
guy.
roll, yeah.
Well, he's mutinying, isn't he? I mean, it depends who's in charge of the aircraft.
Against
If
the
hijackers are
rogue
in
captain,
charge-
right?
Exactly. So as far as the technology is concerned, they don't care whether the mutineers are passengers or hijackers, right? So when she calls Field McConnell in December of 1988, she says, how do I handle a mutiny of prisoners on my Conair aircraft? And by then she's bought, 2 or 3 aircraft. And I think Field told me that he actually told her where to find some more aircraft. So for all I know, Field, wittingly or unwittingly, helped empower this bitch to develop the world's first patent for rent, murder for hire network. Because if you have prisoners on a plane that are traveling with guards who have both been blackmailed or extorted with this pedophile trap, right? You've got the potential of flying civilian aircraft or JPATS aircraft through 911 and taking a group of prisoners and saboteurs into a crime scene before the crime occurs.
Yeah. Now,
Right?
David,
So
before we get too deep into this, I think we need to remind everyone that this is our Friday supplement show. And of course, you and I will be doing an additional hour. We're going to be wrapping up here in about 15 minutes, and we'll resume on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards. That's David's Patreon page. And this is how David earns money from doing this research and doing these entertaining and informative broadcasts with us. And I really do want to encourage people to join David and I. David's page, of course, Reverse CSI Storyboards, is his completely. I have no involvement with it other than providing the videos and promoting it here. So I hope that people will also join patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And David, I want to thank you again for accommodating me the other day. I really wanted to get some important information out there. This assault from Mr. Swigert is ongoing, and it's threatening your ability and my ability to earn money through Patreon, because even though the Federal Trade Commission is extraordinarily unlikely to take action on his faulty claims here, he hasn't even named the parties appropriately, but he has named Patreon as a co-defendant in more civil action that he's taking. So people need to recognize what's going on here. David Swigert is the spearhead of a social media and social engineering campaign that is attempting to inject fake news. And David, I'd like to demonstrate that for everyone, if you'll allow me, because we need to have a basis for what is factual and what is not factual to move forward. Otherwise, we're constantly bickering about lies. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me explain it to my friends in Able Danger, and I'm assuming they're all friends. You know, I haven't done anything intentionally to harm any of them, but I'm very upset at how the focus on crowd-centric crime scene investigation has shifted to third-party polemics, if that's the right word, where did the Jews kill Jesus? For me, whether the Jews killed Jesus, I think in your words, it's the ultimate cold case. Why don't we focus on John Bonet, which is a cold case, 1996 Christmas Day, which is much closer to the home and engages all of these characters, I think, in a very interesting and revealing way. Now, I like that word deplatforming, and I'd like to the extent that I understand it, warn listeners there are serious attempts, very well funded through the Federal Bridge, let's say, or the EVL CAVE, to deplatform independent voices. Now, I'm quite ready for people to put on a website the question and then attempt to answer it, did Jews kill Jesus? That's legitimate. But I think when you put in a lot of work, and Field McConnell and I put in an immense amount of work, hours and hours of interviews and deep research, never rebutted, never, we were never taken to court for libel, etc. And on this idea of crowd-centric crime scene investigation, and we had superb researchers in Able Danger. And I'd like to see those people, if they want to stay focused on crowd-centric crime scene investigation, to join Jason on his Patreon site, join me. I need the money. I'm not complaining, etc. People have said, I'm after the money. Well, I think, as I told you, Jason, I've had a very nice job for 8 years at $20 an hour, picking up cigarette butts and garbage in a car park. And I have great friends. They give me coffee and cookies. I've left there this morning, as happy as a pig in poop, if you will. And I've come here, and another part of my anatomy is engaged, which is what's between my ears. But I find it quite therapeutic, sweeping up this and that.
May I say, David, when you first told me about that, it caused me to feel a sense of duty to come up with a way for you to financially benefit from the work that we do here online, because you spend so much time on it. And I must admit, this was the wrong feeling to have. But initially, I felt a bit bad for you, that my impression was, oh wow, David has to pick up trash and cigarette butts. That's pretty bad. But your attitude is so positive, and your outlook on life is so positive, is really all I can say, that you enjoy the aspects of that job that are enjoyable, your interaction with your coworkers, being outside, etc. And again, I'm talking about this not because I want to fight with these people, because I want to illustrate to our viewers and to the other people who are perhaps ignorant of this right now, that what's happening is exactly what you've spoken about for as long as I've known you. I'm showing this press release from the Business Wire about the Kinetic North America Social Engineering Protection Appliance is now available to the U.S. federal government. And it's the industry's first email intelligence appliance. It offers rapid detection and protection for government leaders and organizations. So this could just as easily be applied to chat messages or Discord messages or Twitter. It's just analyzing text and looking for things that it considers threats. And also
let me just jump in there, Jason.
Yeah.
Specifically, if you look at the invention or the description of the invention, it's looking for emails, syntactic or non-syntactic, I think, images or words, which are deemed to be malicious or criminal.
Right.
Well, who's doing the bloody deeming?
Exactly. So,
right now, I want to just say, I've got a bio, and I wrote something, and it's not self-glorification. It's just, it's an upgraded bio that I'm going to be putting up on my website when eventually it's running. And let me just read it to you. A 1951 insight into this. Go ahead.
I just want to stay focused on this social media protection thing if we can, because this is important and it deals with what's been happening to us. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you and I are both so prone to going off on tangents. Here is the patent for the social media protection appliance, and certainly email, it's analyzing text, whether that appears in email or tweets or chat messages or whatever. This is a network of people on computers who are utilizing various software, potentially artificial intelligence, to identify and eliminate threats. And as you've said, who determines what the threats are and how do they do it? Well, they inject fake news, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'd like to show everyone an example of fake news, because it's important and it has to do with everything that we deal with, and it has to do with what I was upset about. I'm not making up lies about anyone, and I don't like for lies to be made up about me. May I play this briefly, David?
Yeah, sure.
2 hours ago, I was talking to my wife in England.
Oops.
And she said,
sorry, let me just get the audio so people can hear it. What this is, David, this is the original recording where, as I said, I did not steal you away from Able Danger. It was never my intention to come between you and Field. This was all Field's idea.
2 hours ago, I was talking to my wife in England, and she said, I think you should stop doing any interviews with anybody other than David Hawkins. And I said, well, I couldn't agree more. But I said, I've already accepted a invitation from Jason for tonight. And I said, I've also accepted an invitation for Tuesday. But I would like to withdraw because I think that David and I have done everything that two humans could do. And I'd like to relax more. But a way that I could relax more and you guys could do more damage is if you, Jason Goodman, set up a regular, whether it's every week, every 2 weeks with David, and just the two of you get on, because 3 is a tougher number. But I'm truth motivated. David's truth motivated. We're completely different individuals, but we don't like sitting idly by watching the oppressed of the world be hurt more and the children of the world being victimized way beyond pedophilia. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The rest of it's even uglier. Jason, over to you.
So I'm not trying to say that, Field said or did anything other than what he said. Field said he's going to relax and he would like you and I to do broadcasts together once, twice a week, whatever it is. He said it. We did it. And then suddenly he got angry. Perhaps he forgot saying this. But there is fake news that's been injected to damage my reputation, to damage my ability to work with you, and make everybody at Able Danger hate me.
Yeah, and again, I want to appeal. And so Field said a couple of very interesting things. One is he said, we, that's myself and he, have done as much as any humans could do, or something to that effect. Well, I accept that he's done as much as he can do, or feels comfortable about it. I haven't even begun, because until I see these people behind bars or serious amounts of money being taken from them, and I'm talking about the Serco shareholders, and Mr. Swigert, just to remind him, Serco Inc. doesn't have shareholders. Serco Inc. is owned by the Serco Group in the United Kingdom, and the Serco Group in the United Kingdom had a shareholders meeting on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11, addressed by Christopher Hyman, the CEO who had come down from the windows of the World Restaurant, and I believe hosted by, and maybe Wilbur Ross can appear on your show and explain where he was on the morning of 9/11. I think Wilbur Ross, I don't care whether he does or he doesn't, except when it comes to Discovery Time, he's going to be asked where he was on 9/11, because he's the investment banker, or N.M. Rothschild & Sons is the investment banker for Serco Group. Just note to Swigert that Serco Group owns Serco Inc., right? The Serco Group, right? Donald Trump, Queen Elizabeth II, and Kinetic, right? So Serco Group, the shareholders, are effectively in custody of, or have custody of, 4 million patents that have been processed recently through the United States Patent Office, including a significant number of patents that would control what you could project up on the screen in the evil Batcave.
Yeah.
So
the
I'm
ironic
asking
thing.
again,
Sorry.
I'm asking again, the people in Able Danger, go into the chat room, and if you support me and the work that I do, which is related to crowd-centric crime scene investigation, where the best interviewer post-Field McConnell that I can find is you, Jason, because you have a background in visualization, and you and I, we can go in, even if it's a work of fiction, right? We can hypothetically go in as our characters or avatars into the evil Batcave and put up on the screen what was ultimately shown to the public as the events of 9/11, where a long stringy guy in a cave in Afghanistan is supposed to have orchestrated, or nearly orchestrated, the overthrow of the American government. Over to you.
David, we've got just 5 minutes here until we wrap up our YouTube preview for Friday and then carry on at patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and of course patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Part of the reason why I've been talking about this stuff so much is that the accusations against me are not true. They're based on fake news, and they're hurting Crowdsource the Truth. People have been leaving Patreon saying that they've read these things online and they think they're true because they're fake news injects. And, you know, we demonstrated how Swigert has infiltrated the various Able Danger chat rooms with his Prepper Kitty News avatar on YouTube, which of course, David, you didn't recognize that was David Swigert. He's not proudly going in there with his own name and his own face to share true information. The irony of what he's done in an effort to harass at least me, is that we actually want Serco to engage with on this. I mean, if James E. Daniel III, the Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Serco, Inc., would grant us an interview and come on the show, we could ask him all these questions and say, hey, we've found all these technological signatures that tie back to patents that your parent company is the global custodian for, and we have these questions, can you answer them? Certainly as a lawyer, he would tell us to cease and desist from saying these things if they weren't true, or bring a lawsuit against us if he felt that they were libelous, slanderous, or defamatory. And then through the course of that lawsuit, we would have discovery and be able to learn things. So I'm curious to see what the response from Serco Inc. will be. It's also worth mentioning, again, I haven't spoken much about this because I've tried to been, dealing with these lawsuits, but Mr. Swigert has contacted Maersk Shipping. He's drawing conclusions here that do not support the conclusions of Coast Guard investigations, FBI investigations, JTTF investigations. He's writing letters to the Security and Exchange Commission and Serco and Patreon, and he's arrived at the conclusion that I supervised actions that caused the closure of the port of Charleston. He doesn't tell everyone that his brother injected what may well have been fake news. His brother introduced me to all of these FBI people, and it's just so strange how David Swigert seems to be at the root of all this fake news. We also have, David, you have spoken in the past about this press release related to Mr. Swigert and his direct link to the private key infrastructure that is the very heart of the Federal Bridge.
Well, absolutely. So if you go back to Nortel's acquisition of STC, Standard Telephone Cables, in 1991, STC invented the fiber optics communication system, right? The first transatlantic telephone system, TAT8, to use fiber optics was implemented by British Telecom, France Telecom, and AT&T using STC's technology, right? And that was put in place in 1988. So 1991, Nortel buys STC and all of its fiber optic patents. And now you've got a position where Nortel spins off Entrust, right? And it's implemented globally by this company, McDonald Detweiler and Associates up here in Richmond, British Columbia, which has changed its name to Maxar. So Maxar is now in a position, I believe, to integrate technologies on the Federal Bridge, including the evil Bat Cave. And I thank, my Lord and Maker for giving us these kind of acronyms, because these people are so dumb, they've actually got trapped in an evil Bat Cave of their own making. But with the evil Bat Cave, you can do what I believe was being done by Starnet Communications before that raid of August the 20th, 1999 in Vancouver, where this company that was allegedly engaged in hardcore pornography, child pornography, and online gaming was raided by 100 people, including a SWAT team from the IRS and from Customs, and all of their equipment that presumably contains images of the type I've been describing was taken south of the border. Now, where did it go? Well, it could have gone into the evil Batcave, I guess. It could have gone into building number 7 on the floor 25.
Before we wrap up and continue on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, I just want to address some questions that are coming up in the chat here. People are still not quite understanding your process. They're saying, oh, so this is a work of fiction? No. This is David assembling a hypothesis based on evidence that he gleans from the technological signatures of a particular crime and then matches that technology to a patented technology. Then David puts together a hypothetical analysis of what these patents could have enabled relative to the crime, and he offers it as speculation. So in the case of a malicious actor like Dave Swigert, well, we're thankful that he's invited our friends at Serco to engage in a conversation. This is the very reason why I approached Wilbur Ross, not because I intend to, troll him or do a social media attack on him, as Mr. Swigert has incorrectly stated. It's because I want answers. Why do we pay so much money for government and then outsource things to Serco? It's a legitimate question. Swigert doesn't even think I should be able to ask it.
Yeah, so let me just very quickly talk about fiction and fact.
We've got to get over to our other platform, David. We've got 2 minutes to do this, and then we've got to go.
I do that. Let's just take the attack on the Pentagon. Outside the Pentagon, 10 minutes after impact, there's a line of people picking up evidence. They're wearing FBI T-shirts, as best I can judge. At the other side, inside the inner courtyard of the Pentagon, there's a hole which has been punched through 8 walls to leave a 12-foot diameter hole with about 1.5 tons of debris. With the system that I've got in mind, you would simulate the impact of a Boeing in 12 dimensions on the Pentagon and see if you could punch a hole through 8 walls. And you know what? You won't be able to. I'm a good enough engineer to realize that an aluminium-hulled aircraft with plastic and bodies and a couple of titanium engines is not going to punch a hole through 8 walls of the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon upgrade project that was basically destroyed on 9/11 was being implemented. The prime contractor was AMEC, with offices above Starnet Communications in Vancouver. So the kind of research that I do and the simulations I would do, I would demonstrate how AMEC deployed a team to pick up evidence on the Pentagon lawn. They stayed at the Pentagon City Hotel, Sheraton Hotel. They were on the lawn, believing, I believe, that this was an exercise and they were employed to take away debris. So I don't think they had the mens rea. They were removing evidence. Anyway, in a nutshell, that's what I'm doing.
And certainly we would invite anyone from AMEC to join us on the show and explain how we might be incorrect. That would drive us in a new direction. And that is exactly the point of Crowdsource the Truth. So amazingly, David Swigert is participating in the crowdsource process. Thank you, Mr. Swigert, for sending that letter to Serco Inc. You better write another one to Serco Group because they're the ones that we want to talk to. But David, I'll see you in just about 11 minutes on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards. That's David's Patreon page. I hope that people will sponsor that. It's also very important to me that our viewers sponsor patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Today is February 1st. It's the first day of the new month here. So now is a great time for you to get a subscription to Patreon so you can watch all the shows that I have on Crowdsource the Truth. We have a different Patreon-only show almost every day of the week. And of course, on Fridays, it's always David, and we're always covering these very unique topics that are so intriguing to everyone. So if you could, please sponsor both channels, and we'll see you there on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth in just 10 minutes. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, Jason. Bye now.